Hello and welcome to Pockenrop. It's the start of a new month. That can only mean I am back on my series ranking the tracks of each solo Paul McCartney release. I've made it all the way through to Press to Play, which means that this one is the Back in the USSR, aka the Russian album, aka Choba B CCCP. For those who don't know, this album was recorded in 1987. The album consists entirely of cover versions. The original release in 1988 in November was 11 tracks, again, all covers. It came out again 2 months later in a second pressing, which is a copy I've got on the Melodia label, and it's got 13 tracks. This gives me an interesting conundrum to consider, which is the real album. So what I'm going to do, much as I did for the Press to Play video in this series, is I'm going to consider the 11-track album first, and then I'm going to add in the 2 tracks that are on the much more widely available version that came out that little bit later. Before I do all of that, it's time for me to remind you to like the video, click that thumbs up, it really helps with the YouTube search algorithm. Join the subscribers by clicking the subscribe button. And lastly, if you want to find out more about videos as they come out, I release something once a week, then you need to click the bell to receive notifications of future content. So let's start with number 11, and it's the Elvis Presley cover on here. It's That's All Right Mama. I've never cared for this song. It's probably the only song on the entire collection that I don't actually... It's my least favourite song. I don't particularly like it. That said, the performance on here by Paul and his band is fine. I believe it was recorded on day 1 of the 2-day session, so it's one of the 10 tracks that come from that day, on which Paul plays the bass on all of those. We will mention the other 3 tracks where he actually plays the guitar and someone else plays bass when we get to those. But number 11, That's All Right Mama. And number 10, I have placed Ain't That a Shame. This is one of the 2 songs on the record that John had also done on his rock and roll covers album, Rock and Roll. I like the song Ain't That a Shame. It's a Fats Domino song. I think Paul sings it well, but my problem with it is actually in the production. Now, this album was pretty much recorded as live. What you hear is what you get and what they recorded, except for Ain't That a Shame. This track, there is clearly studio trickery and post-production work at play, because we have overlapping vocal echoes and it makes the track stand out like a sore thumb. Paul plays this well, but it's him on guitar. It's one of the sessions from the second day, 21st of July. Ain't That a Shame at number 10. At number 9, I have placed Lordy Miss Claudie. This came out before the record did. So this was actually used as a B-side on one of the 12-inch versions of Once Upon a Long Ago. It's fine. I enjoy it, but it's nothing particularly special. At number 8, I have placed Cracking Up. This is another of the 3 tracks that was recorded on the 21st of July and therefore is Paul on guitar, not bass. It's enjoyable. It goes on a bit, perhaps. It too, like Lordy Miss Claudie, had been released before the Russian album came out as one of the many B-sides to the many versions of Once Upon a Long Ago. Cracking Up, number 8. And number 7 is a song that Paul had recorded before and released before. Different version, mind, because it's Kansas City. So if you're a Beatle fan, you will know that on the Beatles for Sale album, Paul sings Kansas City, Hey, 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 Hey. This is just Kansas City. It's a great song, great rocking, crunchy interpretation. I think this is really fine. I enjoy it a great deal. This was the B-side again to Once Upon a Long Ago, meaning it came out before the album did. At number 6, I have placed Bring It On Home to Me. This is the other track that John also recorded on his album. Some great guitar work on here, particularly excellent stuff from Mick Green. Paul is on bass. It's one of the ones from the 20th of July sessions. Like I say, John covered this one as well. It's a Sam Cooke song. I really quite enjoy Sam Cooke's music. I think the song is great. Many of the songs from here on in are pretty much unbreakable. The fact that we've got Paul doing them means that they're extra solid. Bring it on home to me at number 6. And number 5 is a song that I have mentioned in a video a couple of weeks ago as being a sub 2 minute song. Now, it's longer on this version, but it's a really important song. This is the song that brought Lennon and McCartney together. It's 20 Flight Rock. The bass absolutely pumps on this. Paul is on fire playing this. And bearing in mind, he's been playing this song since 1957. 20 Flight Rock. It was great on here. I kind of prefer the version that's on Tripping the Life Fantastic. It's got that little bit more pep and vigour, but 20 Flight Rock at number 5, really good cover version. At number 4, I have placed Midnight Special, the track that closes the record. This one, again, I think we've got a little bit of studio work going on here because there's an acoustic guitar solo at the same time as we've still got the electric guitar on it. Once again, this track was released before the album because it was yet another one of the many B-sides for the Once Upon a Long Ago versions. This is a song I first came across as a result of the folk band The Spinners, who, by the way, were Liverpool contemporaries of McCartney. But my parents were big Spinners fans, and they had an album called Last Night We Had a Do, and Midnight Special is on there. So I knew this song before I knew the fact that it became a rock and roll classic. Really like Midnight Special. And number 3, I have placed the Little Richard classic, Lucille. Paul does his very best Little Richard impression on this. There's some absolutely cracking bass playing on it. I am always in awe of how well he plays the bass and sings. It blows my mind that he does that. I can play the bass and sing, but to play the bass the way that he does and sing is just mind-blowing. It's incredible. He really wails on this. Lucille, a great cover version, and we are getting into the great cover versions here. And number 2 is the track that I know the least, but I enjoy the most, almost, and that is Just Because. I can't place it when I'm not listening to the album, but whenever I hear it, I'm thinking, oh, I love it. There's so much bounce, there's a real pep in the track, terrific piano on here. Just Because, highly enjoyable song, my number 2. And finally, at number 1, is Don't Get Around Much Anymore. Now, I really enjoy the Great American Songbook, and this is a Great American Songbook song. I particularly adore the version by Harry Connick Jr. from the When Harry Met Sally soundtrack, and that was where I first encountered the song. But this is a fantastic cover. This is far and away the best thing on the record. It totally subverts what I expect from the song by turning it into this rock and roll classic that I'm guessing is how Paul originally heard it. This does what a truly great cover version does. It makes you like the song more. There's some great guitar shredding from Paul on this. This is a second day session. It's the best track for me from the entire album, and it was recorded on the second day of the sessions. And yet again, this was used as a B-side for Once Upon a Long Ago. So of those 11 tracks, we had 6 that have been B-sides in some way. 5 of them before this album was even released in Russia, 1 after it was released in Russia, but before it was widely available in the UK. Now, I mentioned that there was then a second pressing of the record that came out, which is my version of it, which is the 13-track album. So let's do a mini re-rank of the 13 tracks and what might have changed. And at number 13 is no longer That's All Right Mama. It's Summertime. Now, I love Gershwin songs. I think the Gershwin brothers were both geniuses, a lyricist and a melodicist. They wrote brilliant songs, they wrote brilliant music. One of my all-time favourite pieces of music ever is Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin. I think it's in my top 10 pieces of music of all time. So I love the Gershwin brothers. This version of Summertime is a travesty. I loathe it. There's been many, many versions of Summertime over the years, and in fact, It has been cited that perhaps Summertime is the most recorded song in history, even more so than Yesterday is. It's a song I love. I do like Summertime from Porgy and Bess, but this version just doesn't do it justice for either the song or the singer. Paul's voice doesn't sound great on it. It's played well, especially the bass on it, but it's just too slow. It drags the whole album down, and leaving it off the original 11 was correct. Sticking it on the extra one, it breaks side 2 of the album just that little bit too much. Number 13, Summertime. This means we've got number 12 is That's Alright Mama, 11, Ain't That a Shame, 10, Lordy Miss Claudie, 9 is Cracking Up, 8 is Kansas City, 7, Bring It On Home to Me, and at number 6, I'm Going to Be a Wheel Someday. Now, again, this was probably the first track that I was ever aware of from these sessions. So I became a McCartney fan after the release of All the Best. My first contemporaneous McCartney album was Flowers in the Dirt, which will be the video that I do at the beginning of December, of course. But before that album came out was the single My Brave Face, and I'm Going to Be a Wheel Someday was one of the B-sides of the 12-inch, along with Ain't That a Shame. I'm glad that was added to the album, but not Summertime. And then the remaining 5 tracks are in exactly the same order as they were before. So that's my ranking of the tracks on Back in the USSR, Choba CCCP, the Russian album. I am aware that when it was finally released in the UK, it was released on CD, and there was a 14th track, but that was very much an extra track. There is no vinyl version that actually has that on it. And on top of that, the re-release of Choba CCCP in 2018, 2019 only has the 11 tracks. So clearly, it's an 11-track album. So the album itself, whether it be 11, 13 or 14-track version, is by no means essential. It's one of the lesser entries in Paul's catalogue, but whenever I put it on, I find myself having a better time than I'm expecting and enjoying it. The performances are all great, the vocals are all great. So whilst this isn't essential, I think this is quite possibly one of his most important releases. This is a hinge point in Paul's career. The 80s hadn't been kind to him. He'd had some serious critical problems, a movie that was just awful, Press to Play really kind of stiffed, and I think he'd lost his way. He needed to find his roots, and these are his roots. And as a result of this album, we have a critical, refreshing coming on the next album that I'm going to be looking at, on Flowers in the Dirt and beyond. And when Paul needs to, he reconnects with his roots. And Choba CCCP, not essential, but it is important. If you enjoyed this, I'll just remind you to hit the subscribe button, please, and ring the bell to receive notifications. I'll be back in a week with another video. If you're enjoying this series ranking the tracks, then, as I already said, I'll be back in a month with the Flowers in the Dirt. I am hoping to do something special for that, but I've got no guarantees. It may not come off. But until next time, thanks for watching.